Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Today's topic is workplace diversity, what it is and why we should want it. Our guests are Marie Bosman, she's Vice President from TD Banknorth, and Lisa Austin, Chief Human Resources Officer with the Girl Scouts of Northeastern New York. Very good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Diversity is a word that can be used, I guess, in a lot of different ways, but let's define it a little bit in terms of the workplace and how it's used by people like you who are really involved in workplace diversity. Lisa, you want to go first? Or
Sure. It's actually a term that people use as a catch-all for a lot of things in the workplace, but it really traditionally focuses on the race and gender aspects of what's happening in a workplace, but it really is broader than that. It's really more about cultural competency and how do you work together in the workplace to really appreciate and better utilize all the differences that people bring to the table, and not only their differences, but also the similarities that they bring, and how do you really maximize that within the organization for the common good of the organization itself. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's a workplace where the workplace is committed to the terms and conditions for employment that provides an equitable situation. It's non-discriminatory. Everybody has a rightful place to be there. And it creates an open environment for consideration and understanding of cultural differences. So, and the focus is on the workplace and whatever it means to be diverse in that area.
so it sounds like it's got two distinct, well, they're not really distinct, they're complementary parts. One is, yes, there is an ethical, moral side to it, but there's also, I think, Lisa, you put in a lot of very practical points.
And it doesn't, again, focus on the cultural aspects, as most people hear diversity, think it's about race and gender most often, but it's really about different skill sets even that you bring into the workplace, and how do we work collectively to make sure we're maximizing the potential that everyone brings and being inclusive to individuals in the workplace to really support the work of the organization.
I know that you both are or have been involved with the Chamber of Commerce, the Albany Colonie Regional Chamber.
Yes.
And I saw that there's a diversity council.
Yes, the Chamber has a cultural, this is the Albany Colonie Chamber of Commerce, has a cultural diversity business council. The council started up about 3 years ago, and Lisa and I were involved in the process of getting that started. We had a nice kickoff event, but the whole idea was that diversity as a topic needs to get to the forefront. It kind of happens in other councils that they would talk about diversity within the small business setting, maybe in the entrepreneurial groups they might talk about it and other topics, but it evolved out of a council that existed previously that Lisa was involved in, and maybe you want to talk about that.
It was the Minority Business Council, and the focus was then at the time to really help minority businesses establish themselves within the capital region.
And women were included in that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was just minorities, meaning culturally as well as the gender minority. And I think it evolved from that as being more of a broader, once again, not just focusing on the race and gender aspect, but the broader dimensions of diversity. So the Business Council was formed to really address the different bottom line business aspects of what is important for the organizations the council supported.
And you probably broadened your interest base, the number of people who would be involved in it then.
Yeah, the Minority Business Council gave it more of a track of just focusing on the minority businesses, and the council, being cultural diversity, broadened that so it touches every aspect.
And then
of
more
an
people would
organization.
be interested in it, because you might think if you're not a minority, then why would I join the Minority Business Council? Whereas with diversity, you might be very interested in it. Why did you become interested in it?
I was naturally interested. I'm originally from South Africa, and
Oh.
the word diversity attracted my attention because I thought, well, I'll see. I wasn't an American citizen at the time, and was interested to see who else in the business world would be attracted to this type of topic. And very, very interesting process for me. I may have expected, I think, at the beginning to maybe meet some other foreigners, but there are so many different aspects about diversity that was a real eye-opener for me. But that's how I kind of connected with that.
And my experience was that I worked for an organization that had a strong emphasis on diversity and an awareness within that organization. And I took an interest in being involved in that. And as an HR professional, sometimes it comes across as HR's responsibility in the organization to make this stuff stick.
Right.
And so I basically got involved from that perspective, but then took a personal interest for a variety of reasons. And when the council or the chamber approached us to be a part of the leadership with the Cultural Diversity Business Council, it felt like the right thing to do.
Now, go ahead.
Pardon me, I also thought that it's kind of was interesting for me and still is, this combination of diversity, cultural diversity, and business.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for the bottom line? If you work in or live in a country with different peoples, that is one aspect of it. But if it comes down to business, you have to take a different look at it. And from a banker's perspective, that is what got me interested in this as well. How can you marry these two ideas of cultural diversity, which is very much a people thing, with the bottom line? Mm-hmm. That's an interesting topic.
And I think you probably managed to do that.
We tried
Yeah.
in our programs and the articles that we published for the visions. We always tried to connect these two, and found it very interesting how it goes beyond just who works in the business. You start looking at the suppliers, the products, a wide variety of business elements, how diversity plays a role in each of those elements.
Now, how does diversity play a role? How does it help?
Oh gosh.
What happens when you have a diverse group of people as opposed to...
Magic? I don't know.
Well, maybe.
And I guess it's when you're really tapping into the potential of what it can mean for the organization, it's a more productive workplace. From the aspect of the harmonious aspect of what happens in the workplace alone, as well as the business, the bottom line piece, that as part of the Cultural Diversity Business Council, we always tried to focus the agenda and the meetings around how does this impact, again, the bottom line in the business, because that's where people in leadership roles in those organizations can really feel the impact of why it's valuable to really focus on this topic.
Right, and as opposed to why should I take on a problem? I've got a lot of problems with having enough money coming in and not having so many bills to pay. So why should we be interested in diversity?
In most organizations, when you can point them to the bottom line, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Diversity never guarantees more productivity, but they do find that where diversity is part of the business culture, there's more innovation, more openness to new ideas, and those things can lead to productivity and can lead to people being more comfortable at work. And this openness then extends also to who are the customers I'm looking for? What do they need? Can I be more creative to be adaptable to what they want instead of, that's a diversity type of a thinking, is being open to different ideas and different aspects. And that includes the products that I produce, the customers that I would like to serve, the suppliers that I use within the business.
So it makes you understand your customer better, which might be a nice single line thing to say about it as
That
a
could
positive
happen.
thing.
And
Yes.
to meet the need of the customer better.
Right. I'm the host, but in a way, what appeals to me about it is when I think about a group of people, and it wouldn't matter who they were, it could be a family, and you would say, well, from a gene pool point of view, they're very similar. They come from the same parents. And so they're very similar. But then if you look at that family from the inside, you see that sisters and brothers don't think they're the same at all. There are exceptions, of course, but one thing that bothers me sometimes is I've heard managers say, if I could just get rid of so-and-so, life would be wonderful. and it seems there's always a so-and-so. Could we tie this into a diversity issue?
Maybe from the perspective of it not of an individual not fitting in with the culture of the organization, or having a skill set that isn't really a good match for the organization, or the organization not knowing how to tap into that skill set. And I think there's value in looking at diversity from that perspective, so we can appreciate, again, all the people that are there collectively, and how do we tap into what they bring to the table for the common good of what's happening for the organization. So I guess in a way it does kind of take the personalization out of it and really look at what is this person's value and how do we maximize that person's value and their potential.
And I think a different side of that could be if there is a commitment to diversity in the workplace, then maybe that the way that that manager expressed him or herself, and I just want to get rid of this person, one could, through this commitment to diversity, make sure that that is not tied to a stereotyping of this person or some bias because of some kind of diversity. And those could encompass gender and race, but it goes beyond that to sexual orientation, disability, so many aspects that we know of. And we can't focus on the Equal Opportunity Act only and say we have to be diverse so that we comply with the law. That is not a way to create a culture of diversity within the company. But I think the commitment to diversity would at least keep a manager from saying something like that based on a bias, a personal bias.
That kind of helps me. I think that's probably a good way to distinguish. So you're saying it doesn't necessarily mean somebody doesn't have a lot of bad characteristics, and maybe they are a problem. Maybe they tend to insult everybody and they don't mean to, but that's not very helpful in terms of working with customers. But maybe it's a bias.
Could be.
And maybe not looking at the positive skills that they have and only the negative things.
Yes, and companies that have effective diversity programs will provide training so that employees know not to make that kind of statement because of a bias. Through good training and discussion and communication and policies in place in the workplace, employees will know how to handle their thinking and learn their own biases and handle it from that way and be professional about it.
Let's get into trying to implement a diversity program. If you hadn't thought about it, where would you start?
Well, I think you would start with there being a commitment and a buy-in from the leadership of the organization. And that could mean the senior leadership, CEO, the board, whoever is at the top of the organization that's really setting the strategic direction. With them having the commitment to implementing an initiative is where it should really start. Because those are the ones that are going to have to really support it,
and keep it
finance it, and do all the things that are important to get the initiative in place and to keep it moving and developing within the organization.
Now, do you do workshops or anything? How, if a manager, if an owner wanted to implement some features of workplace diversity programs, could they turn to a workshop, or who would they turn to?
Lisa did something really neat for us. She offered a workshop not too long ago in October at the council. She called it Building Blocks of a Diversity Program.
Yeah.
It was very helpful.
Yeah, and it basically takes an organization through a 6-step enhancement process that helps them figure out what they need to be doing to implement an initiative. And it's something that doesn't happen in 3 months.
Okay.
It's something that an organization has to do and be committed to for a period of a good 3 years minimally. And it really starts again with the leadership taking the opportunity to really be committed to what's happening, then taking a look at assessing the current situation within their own organization to figure out what is it that we are trying to accomplish.
Would that be
here.
the second step?
That would be step 2, assessing the current situation of to
Okay.
where they are. And that means a lot of different things for different organizations. And then the third
Are there
step,
measuring sticks how you could?
Yeah, you could do surveys, you could do evaluations, you could do any kind of demographic or statistical stuff that really takes a look at where are we trying to go. So what are we trying to assess? Are we just trying to look at this from a ethnicity perspective, or again, some of the things we already talked about, what are we looking at that really makes up who we want to be as we talk about diversity within our organization? The third step would then be to really create some goals and a vision and a plan for how you would accomplish integrating these things once you've decided what your climate is all about. And after that, you would then design the implementation processes, and then you would mobilize the commitment of the people within the organization, and then reassess and reward the organization for the work that's being done. And then that's kind of like a perpetual cycle.
Okay.
You don't stop there because you've learned some things in that process, and you go back and you start it again. But in all those steps, there are key measurements, and I don't know if we have time, it's a whole workshop, so I don't know if we have time all day to do it. But there are key measurements within those 6 steps that really help you identify how you go about doing this. There's identifying change agents, there's ways that you market it within the organization, there's ways that you begin to look at cultural things that you want to change with policies and all those things. So it's a big effort, and it's a process, again, that doesn't just happen overnight.
You mentioned policies. How important is that?
Policies are important, but you can't put a policy around everyone, around diversity. It's
Okay.
You can't.
It's not enough, for sure.
Yeah, it's not even a policy when it comes to enforcing, because that makes it seem like a rule. And we all know sometimes rules just make us not want to.
Not want to follow them?
Yeah, to follow them. So it's more so setting a culture or a tone, and putting things in place that create a culture that is conducive to what you're looking to do in your organization.
Yeah. From what I've learned from various presenters to this council and my own readings, I think looks like a policy is important to show the management and the top management commitment and buy-in into this process, and set the tone and put in language what is it that we mean by our diversity commitment. But if it does not have integrity, if it's not communicated through the workplace, discussed, reassessed, reevaluated, the circle process that Lisa has been talking about, it's useless. So there is a place for policy, but it has to be done with integrity, not just to be politically correct or to because of affirmative action, some type of a legal obligation. It has to have a real commitment to be something that has value for the company.
And as Lisa said, it starts with that commitment. So it doesn't start with the policy, it starts with the commitment.
Yeah, it starts with the commitment, the awareness, and the vision of the organization. And again, what's driving them to want to go down this path? And then the buy-in. Getting the buy-in from the senior leadership as well as all levels of the organization is real important, and getting people in all levels of the organization to support the effort and be a part of it.
Yeah.
It can't just be top down.
What role does hiring have? When I started thinking about it, I thought it had a bigger role than after I listened to you talk a little bit, because now I imagine you bring somebody else in, and if your culture is wrong, they're influenced by the culture immediately, and they're not going to be different anymore.
Absolutely. And I think hiring plays a big role, because if you do have this culture in place that you're trying to achieve, your recruitment efforts need to match that culture. So when you're advertising, when you're doing the interview processes and vetting the candidates for the positions in your organization, you should be doing that with that focus or that lens of, this is the type of individual that we want to bring in to complement what we already have going on in our organization. So you want to kind of create, again, all these systems and processes that speak to what you're trying to accomplish as it relates to your diversity goals.
I think being committed to diversity means to really take a strong look at recruitment programs. It definitely begins there. Who are we going to get into the company? Are we being diverse enough in who we're trying to get into? Are we open enough to maybe someone who's a little different than what we originally thought we were going to need? and then clearly demonstrate from the company's side and that in this workplace we recognize success as knowledge and your performance. It's not who you are, how strange or how such and such. You're not being judged as a person. That's part of an open workplace environment where there's an effective diversity program. So definitely recruitment's very important, but I think even in that process one should keep an open mind and allow something new to happen during that process.
So you might be looking for someone totally different than what you were even expecting.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because you don't always see through.
You don't. And again, it's not just based on the race and gender piece that people think about. We want to diversify our organization. It's about skill set. If you're an organization that's in the process of change, and there's a skill set that currently doesn't exist in the organization, you want to make sure you're recruiting in a diversity mindset for that type of skill set to be implemented or integrated into the organization. So it goes beyond just making sure we've got the right mix of people culturally. Do we have the right skill set and the right thought processes and all those things? And
now we need to see beyond color, beyond sex, beyond everything.
Absolutely, because you're going after the dynamic that's going to help be the catalyst for this organization growing in the direction you want it to be. And that doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a color. It's more or less a different dynamic of the complementary pieces that someone who has a certain type of experience can bring where that experience is now needed in the organization.
So that's kind of neat. Instead of looking for the same thing, you're really looking for something different.
Yeah.
But you're trying to fill maybe a hole that, and you probably can't know what you're looking for in terms of diversity if you've always thought the other way. So you almost have to have changed your mindset before you start the hiring process.
Yeah.
That's probably where, I don't know what you think, Lisa, maybe where policy would play a role again. Recruitment policies, the people who are actually going out, the recruiters doing this work, understanding to have an open mind, that we are an open environment. I'm looking for this skill set. It might come in the form of a person from a completely different nationality than I thought, or a gender, and that is fine because I'm looking for this skill set. So the policy would be the guiding principle in such a situation.
That seems to fit the fairness doctrine also.
Yeah.
I mentioned that in the beginning because that was something that I always thought about as fairness is the biggest factor in people being happy and being treated fairly. Well, if you're really judged on your skill set, I guess you can't get much fairer than that.
True.
I agree with you.
Can we figure out any critical factors in the process? I'm not sure exactly. I always look for critical factors. I guess it's just a tool that I use. But you talked about, for example, an openness and a commitment. Are there any other things that people should try to think about when they're looking to be more diverse and to utilize more skills?
I guess it's just a matter of if we're talking about how to make their efforts effective in that regard, I would say that it has to be integrated with the organization's business goals. Without that tie-in, it's really not going to be an effective program. And the word program is not what I want to use necessarily, but an effective initiative for the organization. If there's no integration with the business goals, and I think we talked about that enough earlier on, that's the key factor, making sure you know how it's going to impact your organization.
So it's really a couple main things. If you know what your goals are and you really understand the skill sets that might be needed in order to implement those goals, and then I guess being open to the possibility that here's something I hadn't even thought of, and this person is sitting right there with this skill. I wonder how that would fit in with our goals.
Yes, and I would like to broaden that thinking. There's the internal environment of the business, and then there's the external environment. So this openness transcends, and we talked about that a little bit already. But to really keep that in mind, it is not just what happens inside. Diversity is also what's going on outside, as we talked about, the kinds of customers that I might be attracting, or who are my customers, and are we as a population inside reflecting the same population that we're trying to serve and attract to our business. for example, a retail type of organization where the face of the company is very much in front of the public. Are we connecting, or can they identify with us who they see? The kinds of products, certain large office suppliers would sell products and mark up which products have been produced by, for example, a woman-owned business, so that I, as a buyer, can decide, well, we really should make sure that a certain percentage of our supply purchases are made to women-owned businesses, so that we can support diversity in that way. Mm-hmm. So it's much broader than just the people sitting around the table in this one business. And I'd like for us to keep that in mind, that is part of being successful with diversity.
It makes me think of things like maybe a sporting goods store, and you go in and everybody's wearing flannel plaid shirts and jeans, and they all look alike, and you come in with a tie, and you almost feel like, maybe I don't fit here. I just wanted some running shoes.
Yes, or you walk in a really high-end clothing store on maybe Fifth Avenue, but you're there for this Saturday from upstate New York, and you're wearing jeans and sneakers, and you don't really feel like you fit in there. So the store would lose your business. You may have a pocket full of money, but
that really rang a bell. My wife and I were in New York City shopping for furniture, and the attitudes of the people in the store varied from totally friendly to, well, maybe you're good enough to come in here, or maybe you're not. Let me see.
Maybe they can afford it.
Yeah, maybe they can. Although in today's climate, maybe everybody should look a little closer.
Exactly. And one aspect, you talk about success factors. I think a success factor that Lisa had described very well is this circle of events, this ongoing process. Mm-hmm. There's never an end. There's definitely a beginning. There could be a beginning mm-hmm. to diversity initiatives. It starts with an initiative, it goes into a commitment. But this reevaluation, where are we? Have we made some mistakes? Can we do certain things better or different? Mm-hmm. That should be an ongoing process. I think that is a very important
key setting
factor.
Realistic goals. I mean, we all know change doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So setting some realistic goals that say, how much do we really think we can accomplish in this first year? And in the first year, it might just be starting to just plan for it. And the second year might be looking at your signage, or doing the market share analysis, or doing all those things that help you get ready for the years to come. So it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term commitment to really making that cultural change for the organization.
I think that helps. If you think about implementing this and you don't have a philosophical bent in that mm-hmm. direction, it seems like it would be difficult to keep on course. You see these things where somebody's doing an organizational culture program, and that could become the flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. These things take a lifetime. Mm. And how does this fit in with organizational culture? Is it so tightly interwoven that you really can always think diversity, diversity, diversity?
Well, I think after a while you shouldn't have to think about it. It should just be what it is in your organization. That, to me, if an organization is going through this process, that's their end goal. We don't want to have to think about it. We want it just to be how we are, and it just happens. That, to me, would be the ultimate, knowing that you've got to the place where you want it to be as a goal. And I think that a lot of organizations do things that are on the surface. They do a diversity training, or they do a monthly international lunch or something like that, and think that they're really doing something that impacts their culture.
You're done for the year now, right?
Yeah, and that's not how it should be. It should be viewed as something that's a lot more long-term and systemic for the organization, to really create that environment that after a while we don't even have to talk about it. It is what it is and who we are.
And I think it gets us to that point where we can start talking about having a culture of inclusiveness mm-hmm. instead of just working on this diversity issue or diversity policy, which is almost more formal. Mm-hmm. When you can develop through that and create a culture of inclusiveness, you are almost beyond that. Not that it might not be necessary to do refreshers mm-hmm. and to keep reminding the new incoming employees, or when something went wrong, that this is who we are. We are an inclusive environment, and we do that to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
That really helps, I think. If you looked at diversity as a lifelong or infinitely long process, and then you think, well, if I'm doing that, there are all the other things I'm not doing. But the way you put it, if you haven't already done it, it's very important and it's very powerful. But once you've done it and learned to do it, like maybe riding a bike or being a nice person in a certain situation, you won't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, and another analogy would be starting an exercise program for health reasons. Do you just start it because you just want to look good and it's going to only stick for 3 months? Or are you looking for a lifelong change of how you live your life to make sure your life is fulfilling on the long term or the long haul of it? So it's not a quick fix. You can't assume those quick exercise programs are going to stick. You've got to be making a lifestyle change in a way. So it's kind of like that. You got to really put the effort into it and the commitment and realize that it's long term. It's not just something you're doing just for the next 3 months.
I like that. I think that's a really nice note to wrap up on. Any final thoughts, though, in terms of somebody sitting there and saying, oh, it sounds like a good idea. I wonder if I'll think about it tomorrow.
Well, I think a final thought for me would be that diversity doesn't start or end with the size of the company. There is no company too small to think about diversity, inclusiveness, and being open. Because even if you're a one-woman business, you still have a variety of things happening out there. Openness, inclusiveness still has to be a part of the culture of the way you do business. And the larger you go, of course, you have more resources and it becomes a different ball game. But there's always room for this topic in any business environment.
Excellent. Thank you.
Nothing to add. She said it perfectly well.
Well, I think you both did. That was a very nice thing because you were never too big or too small.
I don't think so.
Thank you so much for visiting.
Thank you for having us.
You.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you tune in again next time. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.